your life is on the line and you know that you're on an oxygen tank and they're going to put you on your head, see what you do. Because the bottom line is that me, I'm one person. I can never miss.
The guy's not being loyal to you. How could you be loyal to him?
Yeah.
And whether you're your father or not. So, you know, but it's always been hard because it was my father.
The word came down, this guy had to go. You know, we didn't know nothing about him until the last minute. And I liked him. I liked Bill. He was a nice guy, but...
Welcome to the show. Welcome to this episode of Chatting with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Torre Bonanno. What's up, Torre?
Hey, Bill. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. How have you been?
I'm just trying to stay cool. It's another 117-degree day here in lovely Phoenix, Arizona. So
I know what's going on with the weather, man.
Yeah,
everywhere it seems like it's getting crazy.
We killed the jet stream, is what I heard on the radio today. So
yeah, weren't they trying to blow up the firmament or something?
Ran out of fuel. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was that. I think they tried to blow up the firmament, and we're paying for it.
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk about your grandfather, your father, your family life, and how things were. Your grandfather piques a lot of interest from people. People have been reaching out to me, and they're like, "Wow, I can't believe you got him on," and they're all asking me questions. So I figured let's do it live, and they can ask you the questions themselves. You know.
Well, good. I hope they see that, Cash App for Bill Staxx down there.
Yeah, man.
Don't put their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, man. I appreciate that too. What's good, Everett? How you doing? Richard Dowling, how are you? Yeah, we put a lot of effort into this, man, and you started doing a bunch of shows, and so what's it like transitioning into podcasting?
Good question, because just recently, I've been kind of dabbling at it as a side hustle. Everybody had to have a side hustle, and because back in the day when I talked about doing this or somebody bring it up, it was like, oh, don't be a sellout, man. You can't sell out your family, And I kind of bought into that because it's like, hey, it's none of anybody's business. And I was kind of, like I mentioned to you in the past, kind of, I had an arm's length relationship with the whole, mafia world. It seemed to me a big pain in the ass because the government was always breathing down Dad and Uncle Joe's necks all the time. There was always some fucking, either prosecutor or, state attorney general or the attorney general of the United States. We all know about Giuliani just hassling them. And, so the appeal wasn't really there. But
what was it like when your father or your grandfather we had arrested? What was it like a big shock to the family? Like disrupt everything?
The one that was, that most memorable for me was when I was a kid. It was like in the early 70s. He went away, and they told us he was going to the Army. And yellow cab. Back then we had cabs, no Uber or Lyft. Right? Came to the house. He got in, and I bought in. Right? I was 6, 7 years old, whatever. Yeah, all right. Enjoy the Army. See ya. And about 2 days later, I was over at a friend's house, and his dad, started mocking me because my dad was in jail. The guy was, kind of a jerk, but whatever. And I had, what are you talking about? And then he showed me, it was on the cover of the San Jose Mercury News, that Bill Bonanno, they showed the picture of him in that cab saying he's going to jail. And that's how I realized, oh shit, he's going to jail.
Oh, man.
Mom, and I ran home. Hey, Mom, what does that mean?
And that was 2 days after he went?
Yeah.
So it destroyed everything that he was trying to put into place.
Right. But, it was shocking that, I was, they told me the Army, and then I saw it in the paper, and, Mom confirmed, yeah, he went to jail. But then it was like, oh, okay. Because I know he had been in before, and, I've had other relatives, they go away and they call it guest of the government because most of the time they went to federal camps. So it wasn't, it wasn't like San Quentin, the last stint he did, though, the one that cured him, at least my dad anyway. So
So what was your home life like when he was home? When your grandfather or your father was home, what was your home life? Was it regular? And then when he was gone, was it different from when he was there?
Oh, absolutely. And it was never regular when he was around because when he was around, the guys were around. There was always, Uncle Jack DeFilippi, and Gary Cannellini. And, there was always a parade of guys throughout the years when Dad was around. And all those guys, and I liked them because, I liked them because I considered them my uncles. But when they came, that meant there were steaks coming. There were, they used to drink Michelob was their beer. And, I used to sneak a Michelob, and, and there was always wine, and they were always having a good time, right? Everybody was smoking their parliaments. And to me, it was great, but when he was gone, it was completely different. None of those guys came around. Nobody checked in on us. It was us and Mom, and that was it for whatever the 3 years.
But they acted like they would, right?
Yeah. What's that?
When he was around, they acted like they would stick around, right?
Oh yeah, they always, and there were some of them. I got to take it. Mike Doran, Jack DeFilippi, those guys came. Those guys were always, I can't say they never came. They did come around. My Uncle Joe, fortunately, my dad and uncle didn't do time too much at the same time. They did some that were, coincided, but a lot of times one of them was out. And when one of them was out, it was as good as the other one being out. They were pretty close in those years, and they hung out with the same crew. And so even the Uncle Joe here, parties were good too. Because every time somebody went in, there was a party. They were going away, and then there was a getting out party, right? So those were I always had fond memories of the going away and the getting out parties, right? I remember one year you're probably too young to remember Tony Orlando and Don, but there was this big song called "Tie a Yellow Ribbon" around, So we did that one of those times where he came home. So.
There were like
fun.
ribbons all on the trees around the street.
Right, yeah, trying to yellow ribbon around the old oak tree, exactly.
So one of the things I want to talk to you about is this, and thank you for the pictures.
It fell out of a book. I was, you can see the bookshelf above me. I had it rearranged, and it fell out of one of the books. That let me see if I can find it. I had it. So this was my grandfather's 95th. What year is it? I should know which year. Well, anyway, it was his 95th or 90th. Let's see. His was his 90th birthday. They had it at the Westward Look Resort in Tucson. Yeah, so I sent you the pictures from there, and then
a lot of people. How many people showed up to that? Oh,
there was a whole. Let me look at that agenda. I mean, whatever you call that, the program, and how many people. I mean, at that one, it was like a huge wedding, so 500 or 600. And the best part of that for me, was that every one of my cousins, aunts and uncles, everybody I've known my whole life, not only came, but they were all staying at the Westward Look, because the Westward Ho is in downtown Phoenix. This was the Westward Look, right? I got to get that right. So, because the Westward Ho down here in Phoenix is a, unsheltered Arizona housing type facility, 2 different places. But this is the Westward Look Resort. It's a really nice resort in the Catalina foothills, just above Tucson. Well, it's considered Tucson, but so everybody is staying at a hotel for a weekend. It's a good time,
And I'm sure there was a lot of law enforcement and stuff around for the whole event. They're probably staking all around. And did you notice that they were trying to place agents in your life, like in your grandfather and father's life?
This was, by the time he was 90, it was 1995, right? And by 1995, things had really mellowed out for him, because he really, once he wrote his book in the early 80s, and then he did his time after that when Giuliani came after him, and by the late night, mid 90s, he was a 90-year-old. He was starting to show that he was 90 years old. You know what I mean? He was starting to get slower, and he would mix. He could speak, 7 languages, and sometimes while he was talking, he would throw in, he'd start talking German or French or Farsi, and you could still kind of understand what he was saying by his body language and the context of what he was saying in English, but he spoke broken English anyway. So
Shit, we're breaking up a
did you
little
catch
bit.
any of that? Let's see. Are you frozen?
Yeah, I got some of it. Is he coming in for you guys? Yeah, you said that he spoke broken English, and around 90 he started. Did he start getting health problems around 90?
When he was 90, it was 1995, but he was 90 years old. Yeah, in 1995.
Yeah.
So
how was his health?
Turning off all the Wi-Fi things. You're freezing up.
Like can you hear me?
Now I can. I didn't hear anything just then.
When
now you're frozen.
Throughout the years, did your grandfather have health issues? Italian Stallion, what's good? Randy Marshall, what's up? Maureen. Hey, Tori, just go out and come back in.
All right. But I'm not freezing up. You are, but I'll go back out.
Oh, here, I'll go out and come back in. What's good, everybody? Am I freezing up? I think we got a bad connection or something. Italian Stallion, what's good? Frank G. I'm asking him if he had any health issues, So when they bombed Bonanno's house, this was before he was born, I believe. Right? When they bombed Bonanno's house, that was before you were born, right?
I was really young. It was the 65. I think it was I wasn't there. I was in New York at the time, but I think it was early. I think it was 65 if I remember right. But yeah, it was in the early 60s, but I wasn't there. So
did they tell you any stories about that time?
Oh yeah, that was, of course, that was, because everybody was home, and that was big news in Tucson. And we would spend pretty much the whole summers when we were kids. They would drop us off with grandma and grandpa. I'm talking in the late 60s, early 70s. So we were we would hang out in Tucson, and the newspaper was a big thing. I mean, me and my brother would race to get it in the morning to bring it to grandpa, and of course we would see what's on the cover. And after even there was always articles about it weeks and months after the event, right? There was always more information or another, so we saw the pictures in the paper. So, and then everybody had their story. Dad's written about it in his books, grandpa talks about it, and everybody always talked about what a shock it was. And one of the dogs you hurt. That was been
there, man.
What?
You could have been getting the mail, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the yard we grew up in, right? But my Uncle Joe was the most pissed because his dog took some shrapnel in the ear, and I remember him being hell bent. Yeah, there you go. What year? I can't see that. I can't see the year on that.
I can't either. I can look it up. I think it's at 64.
But yeah, I mean, 60. Okay, so I was born in 63. So yeah.
I don't know. I can't really see it, man. So you sent me one picture, and it was it's like a secret room, secret doorway. Is that in the basement of your grandfather's house?
This house. It was just that previous picture, just beyond that was the front room, but back to the right there was his bedroom, and then they added on this room that you couldn't even tell from the other side. that it was there, and it wasn't until years later that I don't know, I shouldn't have been in there, but I just went in there and looked at it, and yeah, there you go.
So what was in there? A bunch of gold bars stacked up?
No, I think everybody wanted to believe that, and I think even my dad, checked that out before they got out of that house, because that all got that house got incorporated by the University of Arizona Medical Center. So they, whatever eminent domain, I don't know what you call that when they just take over the land. So he moved across the street, and he also had a similar room in the new house. But this one that we're looking at right there just had, just a little bed and a TV, a little black and white TV and a lamp, and it was just and a chair, and that was it, and a couple of toiletries. Nothing. That was all that you could see in there. And reading through his book, he spent some time in that room. Days upon days at that time. So
he would write a lot. You said, right? In the last interview we talked, he said they were taking his garbage, taking scraps of paper.
That was much later. You jumped from the 60s to the 80s there.
Yeah. I know. I'm trying to keep it all in order, but Joe Bonanno is one of my favorite Cosa Nostra bosses, Sicilian. A lot of people love Joe Bonanno.
Anybody got any questions? Guys have I'm reading through them, but I don't see their comments, but not too many questions. So.
If anyone has any questions, drop them in the comments. So one of the questions I want to talk to you, ask you about is when your grandfather and your father got interviewed and you were there. I'll bring up one of the pictures. And so what was it? Can you walk me through the day when you guys went to this interview? Like what was it like? Was it like a bunch of Hollywood people come in? Do you have to get ready for it? Was it done in your house? Like
so I believe that was like 76 or so, or 70, somewhere in there. So I was a young teenager. And prior to 60 Minutes coming, there was like lead up. There was some. We lived in California at the time, in Campbell, California, near San Jose, and the local news team would come. Right, that was a big deal because all the neighborhood kids would pull up. Because Channel 11 News was the news in San Jose back then, and they would come up in their van, and that would be kind of exciting because my buddies were hanging out in front, and I could walk right in, right, and they had to stay out on the street. And they would, have a, set up with a couple chairs in the living room, and they would be interviewing Dad or Mom or Uncle Joe, whoever they happened to be interviewing. So that was kind of cool. But that all led up to this Italian production company came, and they were really high end. I don't know what Italian company was, but it was one of the major news stations or the government news stations of Italy. And they rolled out the red carpet. They had, we lived in a cul-de-sac, and they had, like 3 18-wheelers, lined up, had all the, the cameras and the lighting and then the food. They had like their own chef. It was like a movie set, right? Because they had, catered food all the time. So, and, then I was, then my buddies could come in because it was like, only when they were actually recording. The rest of the time was a party, right? So by the time 60 Minutes came, it was, we were kind of used to it. Except for now, other people knew who 60 Minutes was, right? And they were more excited. They were excited for us. For me personally, it was like, okay, we've done this before, but this time they were filming like we were having an Easter dinner in one of those. It was just, they were just back there filming. They filmed the whole dinner, right? And it's a shame that only those few clips remain. I would love to get my hands on the rest of that, the outtakes that they didn't put in the final show, because that's just 3 hours of us having 1976 Easter dinner with my grandfather and dad and Uncle Greg, Uncle Joe, Aunt Catherine, all my cousins. It was, it's in there. It's in the can somewhere. I'd like.
Yeah, I could see if I could look. I could search for it. I'm sure it's out there.
60 Minutes outtakes. Somebody's got it somewhere. but yeah, that was fun, for me at that age, because I wasn't, being grilled, and I didn't realize, the totality, how, I don't know, how important it was, and that we'd be talking about it all these years later, right? I had, at that time, you're like, yeah, whatever, let's go out, let's go play ping pong, because we're at my Uncle Greg's house and they had a ping pong table, and that was as important to me as 60 Minutes.
So, yeah, back then, right?
Right. I mean, that's the truth of it, right?
So watching
it was part of our normal, right? So we didn't know any different.
Yeah. Watching the interview, I seen he got a little pissed when they were asking him certain questions. He was getting a little mad.
Well, yeah, when they say things like, have you ever killed anybody, or how many guys you killed, anybody who's really in the life, is not going to, even if they had, they're the guys, the quiet ones are the ones you got to worry about. And, by the way, he was, I think it was Mike Wallace, was his line of questioning at that point was just, it was totally biased. And, Dad wouldn't put up with that shit. He'd been been cross-examined enough times to know when somebody was asking leading questions, and, he was way too smart to allow that to happen. And he was probably kind of intimidating when I see some of those sometimes. And then I remember he was kind of an intimidating dude, right?
Yeah, when he
started a lot of my memories are when he was older, and and stuff.
When he started to get loud,
when he got bowed up, yeah, you took notes.
Yeah, I was like, damn, he's stern, man. They asked him about Al Capone being one of his friends or associates, right?
Right.
And you laughed during the interview.
Yeah, because he liked Al Capone. My grandfather had a good relationship with him. He was he was originally from Brooklyn. Yeah, he went over to Chicago and ran the outfit. But he gave my dad $5,000 at his wedding as as the white envelope, the cash gift. And I don't know how much that would be worth in this day and age, but I'm sure it was this big chunk of change in 1956.
What Al Capone
my dad always liked him.
Al Capone gave your dad $5,000 at
my mom and dad for their wedding. Yeah.
That's
and
insane,
I'm sure, and that's cash, and I'm sure that went right into Dad's pocket. So, and yeah, that's right. So of course they're gonna have good memories of a guy that gave you $5,000, or and Grandpa liked him.
Did they ever tell you
what?
Did they ever tell you stories about some of these people?
If they did, it was in code, and they used their they wouldn't say Al Capone, whatever his name was, Scarface or whatever, everybody had a name, and they never used anybody's real name, Scotch and Soda, Two Chins and whatever, Three Finger Tommy, they always, so it wasn't until much later in life that I, started reading some of this stuff and, figuring out who these guys were, but back then, no, they could have told me stories and told me about it, but I there's no way I can remember what the code, what their code name was and what the story, who that real person was. No, I can never, I'm not that smart. And I didn't pay that much attention back then, right? It's like, whatever. It's a funny story.
Yeah, back then you're thinking everything's just normal. This is all normal to you. It's your everyday life. You're not expecting it to be something many years later.
Right. You don't listen. And as a kid, I wasn't listening. Yeah, I wasn't. Yeah. I wanted to get out of there and go play or go do something else. I didn't want to go hang out with these old guys, and unless they were drinking cognac and offering cigars. And then as I got to be a teenager, that I'll hang out and smoke a cigar with you. But Grandpa would get the big thick cigar, and he'd make you smoke that thing down to a nub, right? And I'd be wrecked for 2 days after that.
We got caught smoking, right? We got caught smoking cigarettes when we were little kids, and our grandfather made us smoke cigars and inhale them. We're all throwing up, and I hate to say, but it didn't work for me, But
those were with Grandpa when he was in that, because it was usually late after we've had the whole meal, had dessert, everything's got cleaned up, everybody's some of the excuse me, the guests, who weren't family members, would go home, and then he would break out the cognac and the cigars, and usually start
smoke in the house.
Oh yeah, I'm talking the 70s. No one even thought twice about smoking in that. Can you imagine if my grandma said go smoke outside? They would have laughed. No way. It wasn't.
Maybe you're right. The back in the day, the woman kind of ran the show, unless the man was
in the 1970s. They didn't. Everybody smoked. Yeah. We even smoked in planes. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, no, they did. They smoked in hospital everywhere. And all that. Yeah, when I was born, they were smoking in the hospital.
They were smoking on TV. The anchorman still had cigarettes.
Yeah, you're right.
So it was a different time, but yeah, they smoked in the house all the time. And and then drinking the cognac, same thing. He'd make you drink it out of a snifter, and he'd make you finish. Whatever he poured in there, you had to finish it. And of course, that became a kind of a bonding moment, because I was always up for finishing whatever, smoking or drinking. I still am, but whatever it was, I was up for it. And then sometimes he'd break out the really good cheese after he had a couple cognacs. He'd want to cut it with the real high end cheese that he only broke out late at night, and it was he owned the cheese factory, so it was just exquisite. It was so good.
Would you guys joke around with each other like, you want to cut the cheese?
No, I definitely not. Grandpa was not the kind of guy you would make that. Nobody would, because he was always intense, even if he was talking about a childhood story or a parable or something that was going on in the news, whatever. He was always very intense. So there was never room for, at least he laughed and joked with his buddies, but when he was talking with his grandsons, and and I say grandsons because he didn't have he had one granddaughter, and she was with mom and stuff all the time, so he would talk to me and my cousins, and you didn't make jokes like that, and if you did, then you'd be the focus, right? He'd ask you all the questions, and then when you couldn't answer them, you stupid Americans. By the time I was your age, I was speaking this language and studying physics, and I'm like, whoa. So you learn quickly not to be cracking jokes when he was talking. That's for damn sure.
Latin Butterfly, how are you? Thank you for joining us today. So did you have any times where you got in trouble and you're like, oh man, I'm scared to go home. I don't want to go home and feel the wrath of grandpa or your father?
No, because I never did. When if my dad was around, I didn't really worry about it, because no matter if I told my dad the truth, no matter what I had done, and if he believed that I was telling the truth, and I had no reason to lie to him, because I figured that out young as well, that he would spin it for me and make it all, smooth it over with whoever, like one time I let the dogs out, my grandfather's Dobermans, they were not they were the guard dogs. And I let them out because I left the gate, I didn't latch the gate right. And, he knew that grandpa was going to be pissed, because, grandpa would go out there and show us 3 times how to latch that gate so the dogs don't get out. Right. And of course I just ran through the gate and got something and ran back out, didn't think much of it. And, he was pissed. And I remember Dad covering for me, just saying that he had gone back there and forgot to latch it. And then fortunately, soon after that, one of the neighbors came walking up. They were guard dogs, but they weren't out of control dogs either. They went and did a little bit of exploring, and then they started walking home, and the neighbor just put them over. So, but that was, in that category of thing, that I just remember that as long as Dad was around. Now, if I had to deal with Grandpa directly, I just watched my P's and Q's, right? I screwed up, but most of the time it was stupid stuff that he didn't get really, mad about. But, he was very particular about everything, about the way the forks and knives, when he took them out of the dishwasher. Well, dishwasher was kind of new, because for years they didn't have a dishwasher. So sometime in maybe in the early 70s, they got a dishwasher, and he would know. He knows
early 70s. They just came out then, man.
Right.
Early
So
70s.
he would know exactly how many knives, how many forks, how many soup spoons, how many teaspoons there were. And if there was one missing at the end of a meal, he'd make you go and find it, right? And invariably, it would be in the trash, right? Somebody had, because all those meals were, there were 12 to 15 to 18 people, right? So he would know.
Was it like a big table? Was it like one big table? And you guys
one big long table, right? And and if there were kids, there was always a kids table to the side. If because they just, if there were adults, the adults were at the big table, and the kids just either go eat outside, or they would set something up. And really, we'd only sit there and say grace, and then once grace was over, once again, the food was delicious and it was great food, but I was more interested in going back in the pool or going riding bikes. So anyway, but we had those were a lot of those meals, and I was always just amazed that he would know exactly how many spoons, forks, and knives after the meal, and it was even a day later. I remember having to pour out the trash can, pour out all the trash on the ground, sort through it, and sure as shit, I found the damn fork, and it was like, wow. So
he made you dig through the garbage to get it out.
Oh yeah, he knew. It was like, well, where no one took it, right? He was saying, did somebody take it? Somebody must have thrown it away. And I'm thinking, it's one fucking fork, man. Relax. And nope, it's not the way he was. It was like there was a fork missing. He was going to find it, and he found it, and we cleaned it up, put it away, and that was the end of it, right? We got the fork back. Well, we washed it again, of course, but.
So was he? You said he had animals. Did he have? Did your father, your grandfather have pets growing up? And if they did, what were their names and what kind of pets did they have?
Oh yeah, no clue. I mean, I know they had farms. They always lived in rural areas. They had their places in Brooklyn, but they had the dairy farm. So yeah, there were always animals on the farms, right? And the pets. Grandpa was a dog. He always had 2 or more dogs, right? And usually those dogs were, very well mannered, very, he trained them himself, but he also got, dogs from Germany. Like one time he had a pair of German shepherds that, only understood German, and he knew how to talk to them. And those dogs were the most, the greatest dogs ever. I mean, they were working dogs. They were military dogs. They were never not on duty, right? Always on duty, right? So, and, I would come in late, sometimes because I was, getting to be 17, 18. And, the drinking age in Arizona at the time was 19 years old. So even at 17, you can pretty much drink anywhere. So I remember sneaking in late at night. And that damn dog, he always knew, I would try to come in the back way and, sneak in. And that dog, he would not make a sound, but he would always be right there when I walked in. Like, damn, you knew I was here the whole time. Yep.
Yeah, he's like watching you come in.
And then, the Doberman, the German Shepherds were great, but he really, really loved his Dobermans. One of them was named Greasy, the one he liked, I think, the best. And then he had another one called Toppy. But Greasy was, a Doberman that, was by his side for, every minute of, the 13 or 14 years he lived. So, and he was, he was a playful one too. That's what I liked about Greasy. Even as an old dog, he wanted, Dobermans, not too many of them were into chasing balls, but Greasy, pick up the ball and want you to throw it all the time, and even as an old man. So yeah, there I did remember the names of one of them, Greasy and Toppy. There's 2 of them. I don't remember the names.
Pinchers are awesome.
Yeah, so.
Shout out to MRE. He's got a Doberman Pinscher. How many different properties did your grandfather have?
Properties? Oh, I mean.
Like that you knew of, like houses that he would go and live at. Like how many? Like
so everything, I can't speak to anything really. I mean, from personal experience, he had one house in from the time he moved, he left New York for good in '68. He had 2 houses. The one that the University of Arizona eminent domain, and then he moved across the street. So that's it. That's the only properties that I knew that he would ever go to. I never saw him anywhere else besides my aunt's house or our house or my Uncle Joe's house, right? So never at anybody else's that I knew of from, let's say 70 on. But prior to that, yeah, they had all kinds of properties. They owned property, in Wisconsin. They had big holdings in the cheese business all over, Fond du Lac. They had stuff up in Cornwall in New York, up in upstate New York. They had property. They had the on Long Island, the name of the Sunnyside area, I think it's called. I should know the name of that. I forgot the name of that. It escapes me right now. But yeah, they had those properties. But and supposedly they owned this big portion of land outside of Tucson called Red Rock, Arizona. They had a big ranch there. But these are all, stories that I heard about. I never went to these properties because they were all liquidated and sold for, paying lawyers for the government. By the time when I was born in '63, so let's say I was 10 years old when I really started to, observe things. Yeah, they didn't have any of those properties anymore.
Yeah. Do you think when your dad would get indicted and things like that, did it affect your home life, like the way you were living and things?
Oh, well, an indictment, in our world, that's like a badge of honor, right? I mean, it's hell yeah, whatever, fuck those guys. The indictment means nothing, right? But it's, when you get a conviction, then it's a different story. So an indictment and kind of there was always this element of, oh, fuck them, we're going to prove them wrong this time, right? So it was almost exciting, right, to say, yeah, we're going to get our day in court, and they're going to see it. We have enough, to prove that we were framed, or this is not racketeering, or whatever, the case may be. But invariably, the trials didn't end up. I mean, they didn't lose them all, but they lost enough of them.
And then when they would lose them, what are they saying then? They were just like, oh, the government, they did shicey things. I know the government has crazy tactics to get people like your grandfather, your father that were in these positions.
Right.
They'll do anything to get them locked up if they want them.
Yeah. And, my dad would never, he would take the heat for other people. He would do time, and he did time, especially the whole San Quentin rap, covering for somebody else. So he wasn't going to allow anybody else to take. He was going to take it because that's the way he was.
How did your father or your grandfather feel about New York after they were been gone for so long?
Grandpa never wanted to go back, and I don't know that he did unless he went for a meeting about his book or something, or the premiere of the movies. But that was it. He he called it the volcano. He did not. He had nothing but, I don't know, disgust for New York. From the '70s on, he loved Tucson so much, and he loved his life in Tucson. And we'd go out to California, and in the '70s in California, in the Bay Area, and it was really nice and still nice, but it was it was so different from New York. And he would always make comments like that, damn glad I got out of there, type of comments. He didn't.
It really is night and day.
Right. He didn't miss it at all. My dad, of course, was different. He was younger. He had cousins back there and aunts and uncles that were still alive. He would go back there all the time. We did a couple Thanksgivings there. We went to the parade. And that was, that's dad loved Manhattan, and the way those guys rolled in Manhattan, it was great. They always had, there was always cars to meet us, and wherever we went, walked into.
Yeah, they treat you like a movie star, right? When you come there.
They were royalty, really, and the way they always didn't have to wait anywhere. Always stayed at really nice hotels. If we weren't staying at relatives, we were staying at some nice hotel, and then going to Patsy's and other, the great, Peter Luger's and all these great New York restaurants that are institutions. And as a youngster, you just roll with it, right? Umberto's, and you just kind of, oh yeah, we went there, because it's our normal, right? But I love Manhattan. It wasn't until, as an adult, when, I went to Manhattan on my own and had to go as a commoner, that I realized how exceptional that was. I mean, shit, to have a car,
the treatment, right?
You land at JFK, and you walk off the airport, you walk out of the terminal, and there's a Fleetwood Brougham sitting there waiting for you, right? And just get on and you get taken into Manhattan. It's like, shit, that's the way it's supposed to be every time, but it's not that way anymore.
What's up, Mob Land? Is he related to Carl Pierce?
No, I don't know Carl Pierce.
Did your father ever tell you, or your grandfather ever say anything about the kidnapping, the alleged kidnapping before he left New York?
He referred to it as his time away. He would say, he would tell stories about, when he was in El Paso, and this was, later in the, in the 90s. I was working, in all these little towns all over, and if I was going to someplace he had been, like I spent a lot of time in Louisiana, down in New Orleans and Metairie, Louisiana, and Lake Pontchartrain area. And he used to tell me that, we have a lot of relatives down there because, the Sicilians, a lot of Sicilians went directly. They were shipping citrus out of Sicily on these boats. They would go from Sicily, Palermo, and they go to New Orleans, and then they take them up the river. But all the boats went from Sicily directly to New Orleans. So there's a lot of Sicilians in New Orleans and all southern Louisiana. And he always liked the Cajun food, and always said because it had a lot of Sicilian influence in the Cajun and even
Carlos Marcello, right?
Right. Yeah. So
yeah,
and and then El Paso, he would tell. So during his time away, he spent some time down there. They were looking for him in New York and in Sicily and in wherever, in Phoenix and Tucson, but he was in New Orleans and in the Bayou, eating good and staying with all the Sicilians down there. So,
wasn't he allegedly kidnapped by his cousin?
Yes. And initially that's what happened, right? But he only kept him for a couple weeks, and then he said, "All right, my guys will take you wherever you want to go," because Magadino wanted to talk to him, and it was a fortuitous time for him to do that. And there's the big debate is whether Grandpa and they had known about that. I don't know. He never told me either way. The way he talked about it, that he was kidnapped. He believed it. When he would people would challenge him on it, I would see he'd get angry, and it was anger because it seemed like, yeah, those guys grabbed me off the street. Why don't you believe me? But a lot of people doubted it, because he was supposed to, report.
He was supposed to he was supposed to testify or something. Right. All of a sudden, boom, the day before or something, he comes up missing.
I know the story, but when I saw him talking about it, I believed him that it was a real kidnapping. And, he talks about it, at length in his book. And like I said, it was only a few weeks, and, they settled their business. And then, he stretched it out for 18, 19 months.
Yeah, it was a long time. And then he just pops up at the federal building.
He showed up at the court. Yeah. You're looking for me. Yeah.
Yeah. That takes a lot of guts to do that, man.
Well, he pulled it off, and he came once they shot at Dad on Troutman Street, that story in Brooklyn where they set up a meeting. My dad was going to it and they got ambushed. That's when Grandpa said, "All right, enough. I got to get back." That's what tipped the scale for him.
So he almost got killed that time, right?
Oh yeah, I mean they ambushed my dad and they were going to take him out, right? Because there was friction inside the family, right? There were two factions, and that's one way to take over is you kill the leader of the other faction, right?
Yeah,
and then you take over. So that's what they attempted to do, and that's what made Grandpa say, "All right, I got to get out and face the music," so to speak.
So, damn, I'm trying to get this picture up. Picture of your grandfather's book.
There it is. Yeah.
So, what year did your grandfather's book come out, and what was it like when the book came out?
What year did it come out? Was it 93? I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, I'll look it up.
I believe it was, but it was kind of there were promotions going on, and they had media
published in 83.
83. Okay.
1983. Yeah.
83 is when it came out. All right. Wow. I'm way off. But there was, they had a marketing campaign, and back then, when they had a book, they had the book signing tours, and they got on the local TV stations and, doing different kind of interviews. So that was, it was like, that's great. And, he felt a big sense of relief because it was something that he wanted to do for a long time. And obviously he had been thinking about a long time, and he felt he got everything off his chest. It wasn't until, 3 or 4 years later when the Giuliani stuff, and then it became, that's
around 85. Yeah. So that's 83. He released the book. The commission trial happened in 85, I believe.
Okay.
So
right after that, that's when I read the book. And that's when I, because everybody was starting to ask me about it. And I said, oh man, I better read this. And Grandpa would ask, did you read my book? Yeah. So I read it then, and that's when it became, and then when it was, Giuliani kind of, I don't know if he ever held it up in one of his press conferences, or it was in a newspaper article where they had Giuliani's picture next to Grandpa's book. But that's when it really hit me because, it was on the news. We had, back then it was only Walter Cronkite and, the 3 news stations. It wasn't like it is now, of course, but it was a big story, and it seemed like the news cycle lasted longer back then. So it wasn't like now where something pops on one day and it's gone, right? But those stories would stick around. So that's when I knew it was kind of an important book. And then once again, that was in the 80s, and it wasn't until, the 2000s when I, when he was a real old man, and I started to, I reread it, and in the context of what had happened, it had a whole different light. So,
you started to really understand things, right? When you got a little older.
I mean, I think I read it the first time, like he was going to quiz me on what he said, which he kind of did. He would ask about it. So, that's how I read it. And then the second time I read it as as an impactful book that, created basically the RICO statutes, right? I mean, I know that's a stretch to say that like that, but they had a lot to do with it. And, in the context of history, I read it different. So, and then recently, since I started doing this podcast stuff, I keep going back to different stories, and that's kind of fun too. Just, like something I'll think about that we talked about maybe, or a question that I wasn't clear on, I'll go and find it. And that's been fun. Just, I feel blessed that I have, these basically my family history right at my fingertips, right?
Yeah, you got a book of reference. You can be like, well, what year? You can look at the book.
And not so much when I'm reading Grandpa's book, but when I'm reading my dad's book, I could hear his voice because I remember he used to say that, and that's kind of fun too because those are definitely his words, right? And I could hear him saying it in his voice in my head, so it's nice.
Is there anything your dad said in his book that had you shocked? Like,
no, I mean there was nothing that was in there that I hadn't heard, before, or in more detail, yes, but none of the details were, no, there wasn't anything that I had ever come across that, was shocking. My mom's book, that was different. My mom's book had, there was more of a personal story, and behind the scenes with your mom and dad, it's like, I don't need to hear that shit.
Yeah.
Everybody's relationship is their relationship as far as I'm concerned.
It's a different aspect.
It's
a different aspect of the relationship.
But it was written, my mom's co-writer was a woman, and Beverly D'Onofrio, and she, they came from a completely different perspective, which was, it was good. I think she did a fair job, with mom's plight at the time and, since. So truth hurts sometimes.
What about your dad? Did your dad get shit for doing the book with a cop?
Well, it was that, that happened even later, right? So he had a publicist, a guy named Mickey Freeberg, and he was his agent. And, he knew a guy in New York that was Joe Pistone's agent. And, I think it was over, a few cognacs, and, hey, let's people will gobble this up, right? We're going to get together and, do this story. And, they found a story that they both knew about, a true story. Of course, they couldn't. That's it. They couldn't. tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth. So they made it a novel. But it's a great story about when the Russian mob came to Brooklyn, and when they moved in and they had some conflicts, and it's told from Joe Pistone or Donnie Brasco, the FBI side, and then from the the family side. One chapter of the chapters alternate. It's a great story.
Is it based on true events?
What's that?
Is it based on true events?
On a true story, yeah. All the names change to protect the guilty, for sure.
But you could probably figure out who they are.
Well, right, yeah.
I'm sure, man. Well, man, you're awesome coming on here, man. If anyone would like to donate, you can hit up the Cash App, Bill Staxx 2021. And do you sell any of these books? Do you like your grandfather's book? Do you market it or anything like that?
I have a few copies of they're out of print, and I have a few extra copies that I just have here, and I guess if I want to, what I'd like to do is donate them to somebody's having an auction, a silent auction. Maybe they'll get some money if I sign it. I don't know, but there's just a few of those. But I do have a bonannofamily.org where I sell some T-shirts and stuff like that. I'm trying to build that website up and kind of been neglecting it, but it's time to get back on that. And I think I just
definitely
want to put some stuff up there and see where it goes, because this podcasting thing, I see you have your Cash App thing, but it's a trying to monetize it. I know it's all about eyeballs and clicks, and just have to get that
persistence, man. Persistence,
Right, yep.
It all comes together.
But there seems to be, look at all these comments, look at all these people that are viewing this. I mean, there is there's an audience for it, so I just got to tap into it.
100%. You got to navigate it,
Right.
It all comes together tomorrow night.
Just over the years, a couple of years, we've met. I've seen you grow, and that's great. That's inspiring. You're making it happen.
I mean, it's slow and steady, but still, it's about persistence. It's about
compared to where you were even a year ago, right? I mean, whenever we first started talking, it was more than that, I think. But
I think I was around 2,000 subscribers a year ago. I'm already almost at 6,000 almost.
There you go. So
yeah, man, I'm working my way to 10. And I got Hector Camacho Jr. coming on the show tomorrow night at 9 p.m. You guys don't want to miss that. We're going to be talking about all kinds of stuff, Hector Camacho Sr., and what he got going on, about his foundation to stop gun violence and to keep people off the streets and all that. So I really appreciate you taking the time, man. I got a lot of good stuff to come in the future, and you're welcome back here anytime. We still got, I think there's 3 more parts to the interview that we did last, that I'm editing now. I haven't dropped it yet. I'm still holding off until it's
you know how to reach me.
Yeah, man, definitely. We got a question, Tori. Did your dad catch flack for having a beard?
No,
I heard that.
Yeah, by the time it was much later in life, when he grew that beard, it was when I was at 76. So no, I don't think anybody ever gave him grief. I mean, I think he looked better without it.
Mustache Pete, right?
I may have been the only one. I thought he looked better without it, but
they call him Mustache Pete with the beard. Yeah, man, I really appreciate you. So if anyone wants to check out his clothing line, I'll put a link in the description. Make sure you guys go check that out and hit the like button, subscribe. And if you don't, start your own podcast. Thanks, man. I appreciate you.
All right. Thanks, Bill. See ya.